That's an excellent and important question. Certainly many of my colleagues in the political science community, presidential scholars, congressional scholars, believe that the hallmark of a successful president is a limited, focused agenda. That's almost taken as a truth. It's used against Jimmy Carter, who overloaded the circuits of individual committees. It's used against Bill Clinton, who allowed other things to intrude on his high priority issues and therefore diminished his ability to move ahead on what he thought were central policy initiatives. He did get some things, important things done by the end of his first year, but you could already see as he was launching his health reform that he was likely to be greatly disappointed. I engage in a continuing and very pleasant argument with my colleague Bill Galston at Brookings. Bill is of the view that more focus is essential, that the financial and economic crises have changed the whole context in which Obama is governing, that the fiscal problems that we knew we were facing in the medium term have become worse because of the necessary decline in revenues and the cost of financial stabilization and of stimulating the economy, and he's very wary, for example, of taking on something like health care just because of the complexities of finding a way to pay for it in the short term, even though in the long term, unless we slow the rate of growth of healthcare costs, we are doomed. Fortunately, I take refuge in a statement Herbert Stein, a very wise Republican economist, once made. If a trend can't continue, it won't. And one way or another, it will change, but we'd like to do it in a somewhat more rational way that won't have the destructive effects of balancing on its own. So, yeah, there are some who believe that he's got too many things going on. His foreign policy agenda is already very full. Mind you, except for initial steps in Afghanistan and Pakistan and the confirmation of a withdrawal of combat troops from Iraq, we haven't seen any sort of major changes, but there's a lot up in the air. He's taken a lot of executive actions. There are dozens of medium-level bills moving through. A half dozen have already passed, and he's playing up the health care. He's going to go for it this fall. Now, if he had said, given the crisis, we've got to set this health care issue aside and come back to it later, he would have lost the support of Democrats in the country and in the Congress, and Congress would have gone ahead and marked something up on its own and put him in the position, a very awkward position. These things have been building. Negotiations are underway. His belief is that he can ration his time. You don't have to spend 2 months, 3 months in a row trying to appeal to the public. There are things that can be done quietly behind the scenes, as well as some that require mobilization. The financial package, for example, is despised by the public. There's just a populist anger at bailing out the people who got us in all this trouble, but it's something that has to be done. But he knows he can't go back for more money to Congress to nationalize in a more open and aggressive way the industry. So that's why the complications of the Treasury plan announced by Tim Geithner. So he's playing the real. I think this is a very pragmatic, experienced team. They are not going to engage in naive behavior of the sort that Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton did. They are filled, starting with Obama, with people who are experienced in the ways of Congress and of the relations between the two branches. He will aim high and settle for whatever he can get. And on health care, we're probably not going to do this all at once. It's probably going to come in some chunks, but his belief is that and he says this all the time, I believe in the power of persistence. Not one dramatic action, but a series of efforts that accumulate over time to turn the ship of state. That's what he's doing, and frankly, I think it's pretty sensible. He knows he's not going to get anything constructive on climate change before Copenhagen. He'll get some more investments in renewable fuels and maybe a kind of empty structure of cap and trade, but it'll be years before we make any progress on that front. On the other hand, I think we'll get a good piece of the financial regulation in place by the end of the year. I think you'll see changes in education financing. So all in all, I side with those who believe he's responding to the environment he finds himself in and considers himself in a position to possibly have a transformative effect in spite of the complexity of the problems and the obstacles in the political system. And for that I say Godspeed. If there's an opportunity to break out of a desultory period in American public life, seize it. The most important thing is to do no serious harm, no smoot-hawleys, no really destructive steps that might lead to a downward cycle, one very much lacking in virtue or benefit. The rhetoric of both Clinton and Obama during the Democratic campaign was not helpful, it was not constructive, but you can see they've turned on a dime going into office. The special trade representative was not David Bonnier, a representative of labor. It was Ron Kirk, African-American, former mayor and very much a sort of free trader, pro-trade. Obama's already talked about looking for ways of ratifying some of the existing bilateral treaties, including with Colombia, and some of the angst and rhetoric on Capitol Hill vis-a-vis China has toned down in the face of the recognition of the financial imbalances in the world and the extent to which our fates are linked in very profound ways. I don't see in the short term a positive, aggressive trade agenda. I think the priority is very much on getting the financial system back on its feet, of putting in place new regulatory mechanisms, of doing everything possible to see that we avoid what happened to Franklin Roosevelt, and after making some progress, take steps that lead to another decline in the economy. That these are the priority items, and that trade will be basically on the sidelines. No damage done, but no significant agenda pursued until the economy stabilizes and begins in recovery. And then I think intellectually the broad consensus within the administration is to re-engage and to pick up where President Bush stalled.